Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. The 7-day ultimatum given by ECOWAS to the junta in Niger to restore Mohamed Bazoum as president of the country expires soon. There's been no word on what happens after, but ECOWAS chair, Nigeria's president, Bola Tinubu, thinks military intervention from Nigeria will help get the country back on track. Chiefs of Defense staff of ECOWAS are advocating negotiation and diplomacy. The war is also a form of diplomacy. So why is Nigeria keen on a military intervention in Niger despite the junta's warning about international interference? And what happens when the ultimatum given by ECOWAS leaders expire? That's up for discussion with our guest, security consultant, Dr. Oluwaseyi Aditayo. But first, let's make a quick check-in on those discussions in diplomatic circles. We'll be right back.
Nous nous attendons à ce que
Niger's ousted prime minister is still hopeful that recent military coup in the country could be overturned by diplomacy. His comments were made as the deadline by ECOWAS neared. He says he was in Rome when he was told that the president was held captive by his Republican Guard, the Presidential Guard. He confirmed President Bazoum is doing well as a political prisoner without water or even electricity.
le président est séquestré.
Le Tchad n'interviendra jamais militairement pour beaucoup de raisons.
Meanwhile, Chadian Defense Minister Daoud Yahya Ibrahim says his country will not intervene in the coup in Niger for a lot of reasons, recalling that the Chadian President Mahamat Déby has been nominated by ECOWAS to bring President Mohamed Bazoum and the coupists closer, and that Chad has always encouraged dialogue between them. He says Chad will never intervene with its military. It encourages dialogue and wants stability to come back to Niger, and that the people of Niger themselves feel that the danger is imminent. ECOWAS had given Niger's coup leaders up until Sunday to step down and reinstate elected President Mohamed Bazoum. The United Kingdom looks forward to helping Africa achieve her goals of leading on the world stage, becoming a permanent member of the United Nations and achieve political, economic stability and prosperity. This was part of British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's foreign policy speech for Africa delivered in Lagos, Nigeria. Mr. Cleverly spoke about multilateral reforms that will help Africa achieve her goals, including the contributory role of women, which he says drives economic development, before setting out plans for Africa over the next few years, chief of which is 98% of goods from developing countries will enter tariff-free into the UK as a way of financing economic development.
Thanks for staying with us. ECOWAS, in its extraordinary meeting on the coup in Niger, on Sunday gave the military junta 7 days before it begins implementing measures against the junta. Let's remind ourselves some of the measures ECOWAS leaders agreed on in the communique last week. A closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger, institution of ECOWAS no-fly zone on all commercial flights to and from Niger, suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger, freeze of all service transactions, including utility services, freeze of Niger's assets in ECOWAS central banks, freeze of assets of the Niger state and the state enterprises and parastils and commercial banks, suspension of Niger from all financial assistance and transactions with all financial institutions, particularly EBID and BOAD, travel ban and asset freeze for the military involved in the coup attempt, call on the West African Economic and Monetary Team and the West African Economic and Monetary Union and all other regional bodies to implement the decision. The issue of sending military intervention has come up a few times during the week. ECOWAS defense chiefs held a 3-day extraordinary meeting in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, to discuss this. At the end on Friday, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff and President of the committee, General Christopher Musa, said they had acknowledged the need for a comprehensive approach encompassing political, security and diplomatic dimensions, and that the Chiefs of Defense Staff had agreed that dialogue and negotiation be at the forefront of the approach towards solving the Niger crisis.
We have acknowledged the need for a comprehensive approach that encompasses political, security and diplomatic dimensions. It is imperative that we translate our deliberations into concrete actions that effectively address the crisis and prevent a recurrence in the future. ECOWAS will not be used for coups. Democracy is what we stand for, and democracy is what we sustain. We must intensify our diplomatic efforts to engage with all relevant stakeholders. Dialogue and negotiations should be at the forefront of our approach in resolving the crisis in the Republic of Niger. I'm happy that has been done and that has been carried out.
But the conversation of the use of force did not end there. Also on Friday, Senate President Godswill Akpabio said the Senate had received a letter from President Bola Tinubu notifying it of the decisions of ECOWAS as regards the political situation in Niger Republic. The president, in a letter, was also seeking the support of the Senate on the decision of ECOWAS, including military intervention to restore democracy in the neighboring country.
Request for support in the implementation of the resolutions of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, on the political situation in Niger Republic. Accordingly, the distinguished Senate is invited to note the following and the following actions expected of ministries, extra-ministerial departments and agencies, including military and paramilitary agencies. These actions include: 1. Closure and monitoring of all land borders with Niger Republic and reactivation of the border drill exercise. Cutting off electricity supply to Niger Republic. Preventing the operation of commercial and special flights into and from Niger Republic. Blockade of goods in transit to Niger Republic, especially from Lagos and the eastern seaports. Military build-up and deployment of personnel for military intervention to enforce compliance of the military junta, to enforce compliance by the military junta in Niger should they remain recalcitrant. Freezing assets of state enterprises and parastatals in commercial banks.
So it seems to the Nigerian president, this resort, that military intervention should be on the front burner. That has been discussed in various circles, what Nigeria's approach should be, how sanctions are not enough to restore democracy in Niger, and how we should be looking at the root cause of the coup in the country, and how Nigeria should guard against the repeat of this either here in Nigeria or in other West African countries. All very valid concerns, but we've also considered the impact of military intervention on another country, or have we? For Mali and Burkina Faso, countries that are currently under a military junta, any military intervention against Niger would be tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and also Mali. That's according to a joint statement by the governments of both countries. And they say the disastrous consequences of military intervention in Niger could destabilize the entire region. They also say they refuse to apply the illegal, illegitimate, and inhumane sanctions against the people and authorities of Niger. It also portends great instability for Nigeria. The junta on Monday accused France of seeking to intervene militarily to restore Mohamed Bazoum, something the French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna has denied. For the British, which have former colonies in West Africa, Foreign Minister James Cleverly was in Nigeria last week, and he says the UK is looking to ECOWAS to take the lead on interventions in Niger.
When it comes to Niger, the UK, was very, very pleased to see regional African leaders take fast and decisive action and communicate their intentions, because I think that the message that sends about African leaders being engaged and taking responsibility for the actions in their region, in their continent, is incredibly important. I had a conversation with Ghanaian President yesterday, and I'll be meeting with President Tinubu tomorrow, where of course I will be discussing what the UK can do to support African initiatives and African actions, rather than the UK or other countries trying to push ourselves to the front of this. So it's absolutely right that African institutions, ECOWAS, the AU, and African leaders are taking the primary position in response to this situation.
These foreign powers have already begun evacuation of their citizens from Niger because of the hostility against them, as exhibited by the protests. As it did before, it could happen again. It would befall on Nigeria to provide leadership in the military intervention in Niger. But can Nigeria deal with the millions who will be displaced as a result of the war, the so-called war? And can Nigeria fund the war? Can Nigeria lead ECOWAS out of the war? And will Nigeria and ECOWAS be successful? In the end, will Mohamed Bazoum be reinstated as president? I want to bring in Dr. Oluwaseyi Adetayo. He is in Lagos here. He joins me now to discuss some of these issues that have been raised. Dr. Adetayo, thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you, Amara.
Yes, and we are just at the cusp, I believe, of the ultimatum of ECOWAS expiring. The ultimatum ECOWAS gave to the military junta in Niger to reinstate Mohamed Bazoum as president and to relinquish power. But the junta appears to be very reluctant to do this. And we've seen the people out on the streets, we've seen the mass protests in support of the Niger junta. What do you make of this when you remember that ECOWAS has a move to make at the end of the day?
Okay, thank you so much, Upadi. I think Nigeria is in a catch-22 situation right now. And as a person, I am not tilted towards the position of the National Assembly. I think the resolution of National Assembly was done in a haste. I think there should have been more consideration, and they would have taken more time to look at the political dynamics, regional political dynamics, before coming up with that resolution. And why am I saying this is that you don't go to if you're going to a negotiation, you must go in the place of strength. You have to negotiate from the position of strength, not from weakness. So whatever negotiation or action, diplomatic move that will be done now after the National Assembly no military intervention resolution is going to be defeated. I don't see ECOWAS being able to bring anything, because that resolution has already given the military junta in Niger Republic that a confidence that Nigeria and Nigerians will not allow Nigerian government to deploy military assets towards ousting the junta. And also, they know that the moment Nigeria is not going to be part of it militarily, other West African countries will follow suit. And that will give them enough confidence to believe that they're going to stay. And what that will result into is that we're going to have a military junta that it will be hostile to Nigeria, hostile to other West African countries that were part of the move to remove them from power. And we cannot afford to have a hostile military government at our borders. Considering the fact that we have the issue of the jihadist group that has been operating along the Niger Republic and Chad Republic border, for us to now have, an hostile government handling in charge of Niger means that they may deliberately allow the growth of the jihadist movement along our border as a way of trying to destabilize Nigeria. And it's one of those things that I've been trying to raise as to when it comes to relationship between countries, there are a lot of things that we need to look at, including our long-term objectives and goals, not as it is presently. The Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, which is part of our future plan for economic revival and revenue, is also going to be under threat. So for the military junta in the J, coming all the way to going all the way to seek support from the Russian Wagner is not something that is good for us. And that is why I am not in support of the haste at which the National Assembly took that resolution without considering how that is going to play out at the end of the day.
We're off on a short break now. Diplomatic Channel continues after. So let me just unpack a few things that you said. You mentioned not just the war in Niger. You talked about the borders. You talked about Chad and so on. I just wanted to point out it was the president, that's Nigeria's president, Bola Tinubu, who sent a letter to the National Assembly. It was read by the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, in the middle of the Senate ministerial screening exercise on Friday, I believe, where he requested the National Assembly's permission to go ahead and deploy troops to Niger. We still don't know what the National Assembly has, discussed because, they went into a closed-door session to discuss that. We still haven't gotten any response yet. And then, ECOWAS Chiefs of Defense Staff also met during the week, had a 3-day extraordinary meeting, also discussing the possibility of military intervention. They decided eventually that negotiations and diplomacy should lead, in resolving the crisis in Niger. But the ECOWAS ultimatum to the Niger Junta is expiring soon. Most likely by the time this program airs, it would have expired. What should ECOWAS do now?
So, like I said before, the president did what he's supposed to do. President sent emissaries, envoys to Niger Republic, led by the former military head of state of Nigeria, General Salami, the Sultan of Sokoto, also the governments of Chad Republic was also engaged to speak to the junta. Another round of envoy was sent to Algeria and Libya. And all these are the whole parts of the move to ensure that this situation, this issue is resolved without resulting into military. But while you are doing that, it's also important for you to make a strong position that will make the other party to the dialogue to sit on the table with you. Remember that when the General Abdul Salami and Sultan went to Niger, the purported head of the new government refused to meet with them. They were met by some other top military because they were being perceived to have approached them from a weak position. And these, all these are brought about by, the things that you are seeing, what they hear going on in Nigeria, the strong oppositions from within Nigeria towards military, and the haste at which the National Assembly came up with resolution. NIDA also had that the press release by the ECOWAS head of security, military chief of defense came after the National Assembly resolution. So if Nigeria is backing out from military, then you don't expect Ghana or Liberia to lead. It means that ECOWAS position in terms of using strength to force the military junta to the table and be able to achieve some level, of agreement that can work for both parties has already been lost. And those are things that are very critical when you are, having dialogues or when you are involved in diplomatic, negotiation or relationship like this. You have to go from the position of strength so that the other party will be able to say, if I don't come to an agreement, I may lose. But apparently now, they hold all the aces with that resolution. And I'm of the opinion that National Assembly should have stretched that conversation and be able to have series of other strategic conversations and try to create room for those envoys to be able to achieve some level, of success and then also push it towards the end of the ultimatum given. This will have really gone a long way in helping us to achieve some things. And I said, when you are responding to coup d'etat or to unconstitutional government in a country, there are four ways or four approaches to this. One is for you to make a very hard, rejection. Another one is a soft rejection. The third one is soft acceptance, and the last one is hard acceptance. When you say strong rejection, example of that, hard rejection, example of that is what we did with Yahya Jammeh in Gambia when he tried to perpetuate himself in office undemocratically, and the Nigerian government moved in immediately to show strength, to say, no, we are not going to accept it, and he left. He handed over immediately. That is a very strong position. In this particular case, it's an option, but we did not use that option. The second option for you to say soft rejection, what soft rejection will give to you is that, you know what, we are not going to allow you to be in government because we are not going to accept you. Then probably because of the circumstances on ground, the current president may not be able to hold on to power. So you are not going to take power. Bazoum is not going to take power. Then let's agree on an alternative, government that will be in place and conduct a democratic election in that country within a short period of time, say like 3 to 6 months, and then we have a democratically elected government that the people of Niger will accept. And soft acceptance is for you to say, okay, Junta, we allow you to stay on board for a period of 6 months, conduct election and bring in, and then, hard acceptance is for everybody to just look away. We've seen all these things play around, in Africa, most importantly in West Africa. And what is helping the junta is the fact that they have Bazoum in captivity. And that shows that it will be difficult for ECOWAS to have been able to move military forces immediately that happened. So hard rejection, is out, off the table. Because any attempt to push military will cost the life of Bazoum.
You know that Mali and Burkina Faso and even Niger do have the backing of the Wagner forces, the paramilitary organization from, from Russia, who have said that they support, the coup in Niger, they support the coup in Mali, they support, Burkina Faso, because they're shooing out, all of these other Western powers, from their countries. You have France already pulled out from Mali. You have French citizens already evacuating from Niger because of the hostile situation. And that seems to be, there seems to be a ripple effect here, with the coup and with the impact.
Well, I see it differently. And I think we seem to overestimated Wagner's capability in waging war against the nation. Wagner does not have that kind of resources to wage war in Central African Republic, to wage war in Mali, to wage war in Burkina Faso, and to come and confront Nigeria. Wagner does not have that resources. They do not have that capabilities. Please, we need to have this at the back of our minds so that we don't over-glamorize Wagner.
Let's close this conversation by asking what Nigeria, as a member of ECOWAS, can do in the meantime. The ultimatum of ECOWAS expires soon. What can Nigeria do? Because we'd be the most affected by the coup in Niger.
Well, right now, we are not very weak when it comes to this negotiation. It's crystal clear that we cannot send soldiers because the president cannot do that without National Assembly's assent. Two, President Bazoum is in their custody, which means that a drone attack by the US or by France, whatever, is not possible because they will end up, using him as a human shield. So we only have the option of talking to the friends of this junta, and that is Russia. So I believe that Nigerian diplomatic negotiation or activities now should be focused towards Russia, and I believe that they can be able to, make a appreciable success from this direction, because Russia is just at the verge of building or consolidating its position with African nations. We have the AU there. African nations leaders went to Russia for a meeting under the auspices of AU. And I'm sure that Putin would not want to jeopardize that. He wants to show himself as a strong ally, of Africa. And this is the time when, we now need to exploit that to get them, to get Russia, to get this junta. If this junta cannot leave power, but to make a definite pronouncement on the transition plan into a civilian government, anti-French, anti-West rhetorics or not, the aim is that a constituted government, a constitutional government, is installed within reasonable time in the Niger Republic, so that everybody can be at peace.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oluwaseyi Adetayo, for your thoughts, your opinion, and your analysis. Thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
The pleasure is mine.
This is where we end the program this week. Don't forget you can watch this edition again and others that you may have missed. So just go to channelstv.com on YouTube, go to the playlist, click on Diplomatic Channel, and then click on the edition you'd like to see again. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.